you here. I was wondering how you're feeling, whether you're having lots of things to do and read and work on. Okay, so I'm going um, to move. Well, not the whole um, not the whole post, but I'm going to only paste. Um, I'm going to paste the link to the text to The Wife of Bath, Prologue and Tale. Very nice interlinear translation that I found online. Remember that all of these texts you can also accompany with any of the notes you can find um, online. My piece of advice is to always read the original text and accompany that reading with the comment or the notes. Notes are subjective and personal, and they usually reflect the perception of the person who is writing. So, in my experience, most notes are partial; they're not complete. So, I think it's a good idea to always read both a little bit of the original and then you read the note or the comment, another bit of the original and then the notes or the comments. So let me type it. I'm posting it here. So I was wondering, in this group, I think Andrea was able to go to the talk on the Day of the Dead last week. Were any of you also in that conversation? I don't remember, if I don't have the list here. Did any of you, Paulita, you also went? You also attended? Just for a while? Okay. Wonderful, wonderful. I thought it was a very interesting combination of a little bit of a review of how different cultures celebrate the Day of the Dead, and also it had a very nice like personal dimension because they invited. Oh, okay. They invited us to write the names of people in our family who passed away and place it in a digital altar, which I thought was really interesting. So what I will what I will ask you to please do whenever you have a little time, I'm I don't really have a good idea how to do it, but I'm hoping to put together some kind of a mural or so I was thinking, I don't know, I like, well, let me recap. I want to put together a mural or some kind of infographic or some kind of visual response for the organizers of the event so as to thank them for the invitation, because I want them to invite us in the future to other events like this one. This event on the Day of the Dead was, of course, before the pandemic, was a live event on campus at the University of Maryland. So my hope, of course, I don't know, I'm not saying that it will work, but my hope is that by sending them some kind of a thank you response, some kind of, I don't know, a feedback for them in the future, when the pandemic is over, hopefully, they will continue to organize online events as well, free online events like this one. So I don't know if I'm making myself clear, but I'm just trying to generate, I don't know, some kind of connection with these organizations or centers, like the Latin American Study Center, which is the one that organized this, so that in the future they will probably not organize as many online events as they are doing now, but hopefully they will organize some online events that we can attend. So I'm thinking of, I'm thinking of you, and I'm also thinking of future future students who might have a similar experience, or an experience like this on other topics. So I don't really, I'm not clear as to what to do. Uh, I don't know whether the mural should have some words. Um, I don't know, like I don't know. I'm between two ideas. I don't know whether to ask people to maybe send a picture, a photo, or maybe to do to organize um, a mural on with pictures of the Day of the Dead here in Argentina, or some words like saying, expressing um, what it meant or what it felt very briefly, to have this, I mean, from to have this experience from an intercultural perspective. Um, so I don't know. Do you have any suggestions? Ay, ¿se entiende lo que estoy como muy trabada? Porque aparte estoy trabada en el
Yes, miss. Uh-huh.
thank you,
Yes, I understand you. And
thank
I
you
think
so
it
much.
would be a great idea.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Yes. Como para los que llegaron un poquito tarde, la semana pasada, algunos de ustedes, por suerte, no era obligatorio para nada, porque de hecho no era en horario de clase, ni mucho menos, pero algunos pudieron asistir al evento sobre el Día de los Muertos que organizó la Universidad de Maryland. Dentro de la Universidad de Maryland hay un centro que se llama Centro de Estudios Latinoamericanos, que es el que está organizando este tipo de charlas. Yo ya fui a otras, por ahí con temas no tan, no sé, no tan amplios, no, por ahí temas un poco más específicos, pero igualmente interesantes. Entonces mi idea era preparar algún tipo, que no se me ocurre muy bien, algún tipo de mural, ya sea con imágenes o con frases de ustedes sobre qué, los que pudieron ir, qué les aportó a nivel cultural o qué les pareció la experiencia intercultural, enviarles a modo de agradecimiento, no porque nos hayan pedido. Hello, Romy. No porque nos hayan pedido esa devolución. Yo lo quiero hacer para que en el futuro, por una parte, nos sigan teniendo en cuenta y nos manden información. Y en segundo lugar, para que una vez que pase la pandemia, sigan organizando este tipo de eventos que nos permiten acercarnos a lugares donde físicamente nos resultaría muy difícil ir. Entonces, pienso yo que para este centro, recibir, digamos, una respuesta o un agradecimiento, no solo un agradecimiento, porque eso lo puedo mandar yo, un gracias, pero sí mostrar lo que, el feedback de los alumnos, en un futuro nos puede ayudar para nosotros como grupo o incluso para generaciones futuras de chicos, ¿no? Yo siempre pienso en ese tipo de actividades como lo pienso como trabajos grupales y de posta. Uno por ahí a veces, no, uno no puede, por supuesto, asistir a todos los eventos, pero cuando uno asiste a alguno, es como que está haciendo una contribución o una apuesta, no solo por uno, por lo que uno aprende, sino por los compañeros del futuro, que, para que sigan teniendo esas oportunidades. Por eso yo siempre que los invite, no es de obligación para que vayan a todos, pero sí cuando puedan, conéctense o vayan un poquito, no solo por ustedes, sino porque cuando uno apoya esos eventos, está generando la posibilidad de que en el futuro haya más, ¿sí? Ustedes piensen que para un organizador, si organizador organiza algo y no va nadie, ¿qué ganas dan de hacer otro similar? Ninguna gana. Pero si uno al unirse, más que hoy en día los eventos virtuales, uno se puede unir este, un ratito, incluso a cámara apagada, a micrófono apagado, es como un voto, ¿no? Es un apoyo, ¿no? A ese evento, a esa actividad, y como yo siempre lo pienso, no es que lo pienso solo por mí o por ustedes en este grupo en particular, sino que lo pienso por mis grupos a futuro para que también este, tengan esa opción. En fin, no sé si se les ocurre, si desde los chicos que han llegado, si hay otros chicos que pudieron acercarse al evento sobre el Día de los Muertos de la semana pasada y se les ocurre alguna idea o están trabajando. Yo no los quiero sobrecargar, no es que quiero que ustedes hagan el mural, lo voy a hacer yo, pero si tienen ideas sobre qué app o qué página para hacer murales me recomiendan, también todo es, acepto todo tipo de sugerencias. Okay, so if you have, let me show you again. Um, Wait a second. Ah, here is. I'm going to post it again in our classroom, but uh, here is the Google Doc where you can brainstorm ideas with me as to whether to do something that is only visual for um, for the University of Maryland, or if you think we could include some short sentences, like some kind of um, feedback, or okay, a different option would be to share what how the day canvas. Okay, thank you, Gabi, and Paula. Um, another thing that I think it's also a good idea is to think of ways, I mean, for us to put something together that represents or show how we celebrate or how we remember our dead here in Salta. I think that's another possibility, um, how we remember. I don't know, like for example, in other groups, I read and I was told that people also offer food for their family members who have passed away. Does any of you do that? Do you offer food to the people in your family who have passed away? Really, Barbara? I didn't know. Well, you do, Belen, too. Well, you see, I don't know. I'm not originally from Salta. Oh, that's wonderful. I didn't know it. You see? Well, you always learn. So, do you prepare a table for the people who, I mean, your relatives? Do you prepare? Oh, Belen, could you take a picture of that? I mean, without your mom, just the table. If you have done it, or it's no longer um organized. Ah, that's so special. Well, I didn't know it. I didn't know that that people did it here in Salta.
Yes, here in Salta. I didn't know also, but my family used to do it also.
Thank you for that. Well, I think
Hmm.
that's yeah, I think that's a very interesting
Miss,
thing. That's
I
very
think
interesting.
that, Miss, I think
Yes.
that, as you said before, we can share some pictures of maybe an artwork. I don't know,
Oh, please, let's do that. If you
that represents that.
yes, yes. I'm thinking yeah, yes. I think that would be a great idea. Maybe we could do something very simple. Of course, I'm thinking about very simple ideas, but on one mural, I know, Romy. I didn't know that either. But again, I'm not originally from Salta, so I don't know, but I don't remember my classmates mentioning it. But it's also a very personal experience, I would say, right? Um, so maybe what we could do, let's see, well, in Canva or somewhere else, um, we could do something just with pictures, um, showing, like, for example, some people going to church or to the cemetery, and others um, uh, preparing a table with food, as you mentioned. So you're giving me an idea. Maybe I could do something visual showing like those different options. Any other ways in which you remember the relatives who have passed away? And by the way, I know this is a very special day for many of us. Um, so my thoughts and prayers to all of your relatives who passed away, and also a very tight hug for all of you, especially if you are hurting for somebody who has uh, passed away. In my case, I'm very shocked, and this is one of the reasons why I like including the following text we are reading, which is The Wife of Bath by Chaucer, which was written in medieval times, but which shows a woman who suffers violence. And I don't know, I don't know your thoughts about what happens in Argentina with violence against women. But I'm originally from Tucumán. Um, I didn't live there my whole life, but that's where I was born. That's where I studied to be a teacher, and that's what I worked for many, many years, for more than 10 years. And I don't know if you heard the horrible, horrible crime that took place last Friday. A teacher of English was murdered by a former student of hers who was obsessed with her, and who, for the past 5 years, had been stalking her and m- making her life a nightmare by sending her threats, by sending her family threats. Um, what really, oh, it's her name was Paola Estefania Tacacho. She was actually from Salta, but she went to Tucumán to study. She was a teacher. She was studying to be a licenciada, and uh, as I was telling you, she was stalked for 5 years. She presented 13 um how to say 13 denuncias. She had tried to she had presented in to try to protect herself, and the person who was stalking her was mentally unstable, and he killed her on Friday, and then he killed himself. So so traumatic, so horrible. But it makes me think, what's happening in our society? Why? I mean, as young people, and from your perspective, what happens with us? Why is there so much violence against women? I cannot. I don't know. I cannot wrap my mind around it. How do you interpret that? We are going to read, as I said before, about a woman who suffers violence. Um, and this is a medieval character. And when I think how many centuries have passed by, and what's happening in the 21st century in Argentina, how do you interpret what happens? I just don't have an I don't have an answer, and I'm not um I don't expect an answer either, but just your perspective on violence against women. Do you have any like opinions, or I don't know how you think about this? I don't know how you talk about this with your friends, how you feel about, I don't know, just being outside. Just so terrible.
It's so terrible, Miss, and it's hard to explain how to feel in this society because it's difficult for us, for women, to trust on men or to start a life with a man. I don't know. It's really difficult because you don't know who is by your side.
You don't know. I agree with you, Gabi. It's just such a so I don't know, it's so painful, so horrible. I think also in many cases, like in the case of this girl who I I only got to meet her very briefly just before when she was at university in Tucumán, right when I was about to come here to Salta. So I didn't really get to meet to yes to know her. Um, but I don't know. I don't know. Maybe the boys in the group, Hector, Marco. Do you have any insights or any ideas why? I just don't know why. In some cases, there is, of course, a mental illness, as there was in this case. Um, and of course, yes, yeah, of course. I think it's a combination of mental illness, an absence of justice in this case, an absence of justice, because as I said before, um, there were about 13, I don't know how to say it, 13 denuncias judiciales. This teacher did everything she could. Um, so I don't know. I think about this how to, on the one hand, I'm very worried. Most of my students, I mean, in my classrooms, whether face to face or online like this one, most of my students are women. So I look at your pictures, your faces, and I worry terribly. On the other, as you know, I also have a daughter, and it's just horrifying to think that when she's a teenager and she starts going out, I will be scared every time she goes out. It's just this shouldn't happen. It shouldn't be this way. So it's just so terrible. So I don't know what's happening to us as a society. I don't know whether the same percentages of um, tragic cases like we have in Salta, in Tucumán, in the north of Argentina, is found in other countries as well. I don't know whether it's just the perception that in Argentina it's getting so intense and terrible. In anyway, as a teacher, and I think this is something that as teachers yourselves, you will also notice that you do have the responsibility to present the topic in a variety of ways, depending on the age of your students, of course. But talking about respecting another person, um, I mean, exposing. No, 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 no. In most cases, it doesn't. I agree, Barbara. I think um, exposing violence, talking about bullying, and also talking about respect and caring for others is part of our jobs. And I think um, no matter the age of our students, we can always find ways to okay, let's see. Maria is typing something a little bit longer, so I'm going to read it. A few days ago, I saw a post that really shocked me. It was a question, one for men and another for women. What would you do in a world without men and women? Men's responses were, I would be sad, horrible, and so on. And women's responses were, I would go out at night, I would wear whatever I want, or I would go outside without fear. Yes, it is thought provoking. So it makes you think, as I was saying, of what you can do as a teacher, of course, within the syllabus and within the limits that your coordinator gives you, of course, but what you can do um, to address issues of violence, bullying, and also respect, sympathy, empathy. I think there's a lot we can do as teachers, directly or indirectly. Um, in my case, what I try to do is to continue to include characters like the one we are going to meet now, so as to so as not to forget about the topic and to connect it to what happens in our society. I think the wife of Bath is a very interesting character. She's a character that was given in marriage at the age of 12, um, which is okay, it was conventional in medieval times, but even in medieval times is quite early, and she's a survivor. She's a highly criticized. It's a very complex character, as we will see. She is highly criticized for being manipulative, but at the same time, uh, as I said, she is a survivor within a very violent society, a society that is extremely violent and suffocating against women. So, so to think about this character with that perspective, I think is eh, very interesting and helpful, and also I think puts Chaucer under such an interesting light, because when you think of the fact that Chaucer was a medieval author and at the same time he's trying to expose something, he's trying to show something that is not right, that is not okay, uh, that violence is not okay. We have seen in the general prologue that Chaucer is interested in showing that corruption is not okay. And I think in With the Wife of Bath, he's also interested in showing that violence against women is wrong. And again, I think we have to acknowledge the fact that he is a medieval author, um, with, I mean, without any of the concepts of human rights that we have nowadays, or without any of the concepts of justice that we have nowadays. And yet, um, eh, through The Wife of Bath, who has a very long prologue, very, very long. I know it can be a little bit tiring to read the prologue, but I think it's worth it. And as I said before, you can always accompany your reading of the text with more lively notes. But I think it's worth it, because this is, I think, an early attempt, a very early attempt from an author to expose the injustice that women suffered at the time, the instances of injustice that women suffered. So okay, so let me share the screen with you. As I told you before, I had the last week, the final exam last week. I found an interlinear translation done by the University of Harvard, which, opa, okay, I'm sorry, somebody was trying to. So let me find it. Yes, wait a second. Okay. So this is the web page I found, which I think also has the philological interest of showing you medieval um, medieval English, which I think is also interesting. And then you have quite a literal translation underneath. So the wife of Bath, so this is a character, as we know, one of the pilgrims. And I mentioned in our first classes, in one of our early classes, that there are different means of characterization, different ways of characterizing a character. Let me post it here. So what do we mean by characterization? The way in which a character is constructed, the different ways in which a character is constructed. So some of those ways are, for example, the descriptions from other characters. For example, in the general prologue, the narrator describes the wife of Bath. So the narrator provides his own perception of the wife of Bath. So that's one way of characterizing the wife of Bath. But the wife's words and behaviors are other means of characterization. Now, the wife's words and with other characters, it's the same. In the case of the Canterbury Tales, but especially with the wife's words, because she has such a long prologue to her own tale. The wife's words are divided into two. One is the wife's prologue, in which she introduces her story. So in the wife's prologue, she introduces the story she's going to tell. And in doing so, she presents not only her ideas, especially regarding marriage and her relationship to men, but also her life experience with her different husbands. She has been married a number of times, and she's going to share with us her experience with her 5 husbands. And then we have the wife's tale. Remember that tale means story, in which she will tell a story in which there are characters that she has created and is sharing with the other pilgrims. And the story she tells is another means of characterization. So one instance of characterization is when the wife introduces the story. Another instance of characterization is when she tells the story that we are going to see is the story of a knight. The wife's tale is about a knight who rapes a woman. Look how violent and how shocking the beginning of the story is. That's why I appreciate, I acknowledge the fact that Chaucer would be interested in the experiences of women. I find that so interesting, so valuable, and unfortunately for us, still timeless in the sense that we can still connect those experiences to, unfortunately, to our days. Um, so let's go to, as I was saying, this translation I found online by a professor at the University of Harvard. So unfortunately, there were other connected pages to this one, but they are no longer available. That's a pity, probably created by the professor who was giving the class. So she begins by saying that experience, though no written authority were in this world, is good enough for me to speak of the woe that is in marriage. So, in those first lines, of course, I'm only reading the second line, which is the line in modern English, right? So, in those first lines, she introduces herself as a character who has experience, and she compares that experience by contrast to written authority, because we have to remember that at the time, um, authority was held mainly by men, and especially by men who had access to education, who had access to writing and reading. Um, and but she says that experience is enough for her to speak of the woe that is in marriage. Woe meaning suffering, right? The suffering that is in marriage. For gentlemen, since I was 12 years of age, thank be God who is eternally alive, I have had 5 husbands at the church door. If I so often might have been wedded and all were worthy men in their way, but to me it was told, certainly it is not long ago, that since Christ went never but once to a wedding in the Cana of Galilee, that by that same example he taught me that I should be wedded but once. So there, she's probably answering some smiles or looks she could have perceived in her audience. Let's remember that all of the characters are telling their stories or introducing their stories to a group of pilgrims, right? They are telling stories to pass the time. So, so when she says that she's had 5 husbands, how do you think her audience, mostly men, how do you think they reacted to her when she mentioned that she had 5 husbands? How would you react nowadays if you learned first a woman has had 5 husbands? That she's unbearable? No divorce at the time, so that means they all died. No divorce at the time. Good. It's always interesting to think of the context of production and the context of reception. We do have divorce nowadays. At the time, we don't. They didn't. So at the time, in medieval times, what do you think would have been the values expected in a woman? The values, the roles. Probably modesty, chastity, loyalty, and probably the roles in society. Yes, Bernabe, very good. Devoted to her husband. Um, so just as we saw with Anglo-Saxon characters, most probably women were understood, or their identity was tied to the men in their lives. So women were daughters, wives, and mother. Remember the interesting reference to Grendel's mother in Beowulf. That is, the identity of that monster is tied to her male child. So, so the fact that the wife has had 5 husbands could have, at the time, in the context. So remember that we can think of 2 contexts: the context of production of the text, in this case, medieval times, and the context of reception, which is right now for us, right? So during medieval times, people who were listening to her would have probably associated her um, to misfortune. Why not? That's an interesting observation, Barbara. But also to lust, to sexuality. Um, and we're going to see that in a way she she somehow addresses issues of sexuality and passion as in a very open way, as we might see in some of the instances of her prologue. So in her prologue, she talks about herself. She talks about the husbands she has had and her experiences with them. So let's continue for a little bit more. So she says that Christ never said in the Bible that women should be wedded, that is, should be married only once. So as you can see, and I'm reading line 13, right? That I should be wedded, but means only in this context. So that I should be wedded only once. So what she's probably addressing is the convention or the understanding that once a woman was a widow at the time, they could not marry again. And in order to present her her situation, her case, her point, she mentions Christ, and later on she's going to mention the apostles, and she's going to quote some parts of the Bible, and she's going to use the Bible as the written authority. Okay, so the Bible is the written authority for her. And it's the text. The text she can defend herself with. It's the one text that men could not possibly attack, because they could attack her, being a woman. She's going to mention in her text that she's uneducated. That is, she's going to quote the Bible, but she doesn't have direct access to it. That is, she has heard the Bible read, but she hasn't read it herself, right? She cannot read or write. So, in also, I think it's very interesting to see her in this context, in a context of pilgrims who are mostly men. Most of the men in the pilgrimage um, are part of the clergy. Being part of the church gave them access to education. But here we have a woman who has found a way to be independent. Independent in many ways. She's financially independent because of the inheritance her husbands um, have left for her, but she's also um, emotionally independent, and also is also independence in the sense that she is able, for example, to travel, and she also mentions that she has traveled on other pilgrimages. So she's mentally independent. I think that is, a, I think, this is my personal opinion, that is Chaucer's um, feat. That is Chaucer's, I think, legacy, legacy for the 21st century, to have created, because I mean, Chaucer as a man could have created only other characters that we can find in the Canterbury Tales, women who are treated as objects, who are treated as sexual objects. We are going to compare this story to another, The Miller's Tale, in which the main character is a young woman who who is unfaithful, and she's also very passionate, but disloyal to her husband. And it's the general tone of the text is very light. It's humorous, not to be taken seriously. But in the case of the Wife of Bath, um, Chaucer was interested in showing us that even when patriarchal patriarchal society in medieval times, in the 15th century, was so suffocating for women, there were independent women. There were women who enjoyed traveling, who enjoyed their independence, and I think that's just wonderful to leave that as a legacy for us to see that not all women were only devoted to their husbands and their children and limited to their homes. There were other women who were trying um, to forge a different future for them. Um, so I thought that is really interesting. And as I was saying before, she has no access to education. And I think that's also something for us to reflect, to be thankful for. The fact that all of us here, even in the hardest of circumstances as we have nowadays, we do have access to education. We can study. In the near future, all of you will have a wonderful tool um, to to fight for your rights, which is going to be your degree, which is going to give you financial independence. And I think we're uh, so blessed in that way that even when there are so many instances of violence in our society, Um, Unfortunately, our society is so violent, but still, we do have elements to fight for the kind of life we want to live. I think that is just wonderful. Um, so line 14, let me continue. Listen also, lo, what a sharp word for this purpose. Beside a well, Jesus, God and man, spoke in reproof of the Samaritan. Thou hast had 5 husbands, he said, and that same man that now has thee is not thy husband. Thus he said certainly. What he meant by this, and she's here quoting um, uh, an excerpt from the Bible, right? What he meant by this, I cannot say, but I ask, why the 5th man was no husband to the Samaritan? How many might she have in marriage? I never yet heard tell in my lifetime a definition of this number. I'm sorry. I never yet heard tell in my lifetime a definition of this number. Men may conjecture and interpret in every way, but well I know, expressly, without lie, God commanded us to grow fruitful and multiply. That gentle text I can well understand. Also, I know well, he said my husband should leave father and mother and take to me, but he made no mention of number, of marrying 2 or of marrying 8. Why should men then speak evil of it? So notice how clever she is, right? Um, what she says, she's trying to use a technicality that she has found in the Bible. In all of these lines, what she's saying is there's not one section in the Bible where Christ says that women should have a definite number of husbands. There's no defining number as to the number of husbands a woman should have. So why should men, she says, and I think this is a very um, a very interesting discussion in connection to men and women, because she mentions that men are the ones who interpret the Bible in one way or another. So why should men speak evil of it? So even when Chaucer is a male author, he creates a female character. He creates a female character who challenges um, men's interpretations, men's interpretations, men's judging. Um, and then he goes to another part, another um, quote from the Bible. Lo, consider here the wise king, Dan Solomon. I believe he had wives more than one. So she also quotes other parts of the Bible that show you the hypocrisy and the double morality when it comes to judging men and women, um, even when even when using excerpts from the Bible itself. So if King Solomon could have different wives, the idea is, why would women be seen or interpreted as evil if they have more than one husband? As would God, it were lawful unto me to be refreshed half so often as he. What a gift of God he had because of all his wives. No man that in this world is alive has such a gift. God knows this noble king, according to my judgment, the first night had merry feet. She's also quite sensuous in the comments she makes. She's all the time making allusions and um, allusions to sex or to um, like um, humorous allusions like here. Um, so the first night had many a merry fit with each of them. So well things went for him in his lifetime. Now, the wife's open sexuality would also be an object of criticism at the time, because, as I was pointing out before, women were expected to be modest and constrained in their behavior, restrained in their behavior, showing constraint. But in this case, in the case of the wife of Bath, she's very, not only is she passionate, but she's also open about it. And she's also humorous about it, which I think again makes her a very interesting character. Um, so going back to line 42, the first night had many a merry fit with each of them, so well things went for him in his lifetime. Blessed be God that I have wedded five, of which I have picked out the best, both of their lower purse and of their strong box. Different schools make perfect clerks, and different practice in many various works makes the workman truly perfect. Five husbands calling am I. Welcome the sixth, whenever he shall appear. For truly I will not keep myself chaste in everything. When my husband is gone from the world, some Christian man, um, sorry, I got lost, shall wed me straightway. For then the apostle says that I am free to wed by God's side, I swear, wherever it pleases me. He says that to be wedded is no sin. It is better to be wedded than to burn. What do I care though folks speak evil of um, cursed Lamech and his bigamy? I know well Abraham was a holy man, and Jacob also, insofar as I know, and each of them had more than two wives, and many another holy man also. But once again, she goes back to characters in the Bible to to prove her point that if men in the Bible were allowed to have more than one wife, why should she be considered evil or at fault if she has had five husbands? Um, okay, so something that I would like you to think also um, in her prologue is how persuasive she is. It's she's extremely persuasive. Um, if you are writing persuasive essays for your language class, you know that one of the strategies to write an argumentative essay is to know your audience, and she knows her audience. Her audience are mainly men. Many of them are clergymen, and most of them are familiar with the Bible and with biblical stories. So she's using biblical stories to her advantage. In the following lines, line line 59 onwards, she's going to, so in the lines I have just read, she is putting forth her theory that it's not a hypothesis, it's her own theory that the Bible doesn't say anything about women having more than one husband. And now she's going to subtly change the focus, and she's going to say that there's not one reference in the Bible for women to be virgin before marriage, because that's probably addressing another um, um, another criticism against her or against women who got married more than once, that needless to say, the second time a woman gets married after widowhood, after becoming a widow, she's no longer a virgin. So she's going to change her focus to virginity. And the fact that it also shows you something that you will read about if you, of course, if you do research on the role of women at the time, that addresses the fact that at the time, virginity was an asset. That is, a woman's virginity was, oh, what's a synonym for asset? Let me find a synonym. An advantage. It was an advantage. I would say it was more than an advantage. Mm, but advantage is a good synonym. Yeah, well, something useful or valuable. Um, and I think she is putting that that convention, that idea under the microscope, and putting some perspective on it in a very interesting way. So basically, what he says is similar to what he said. What she says, I'm sorry, what she says or what she claims is similar to what she has expressed in connection to a woman getting married several times. Let's go to line 59. Where can you find in any historical period that high God forbade marriage by express word? I pray you, tell me. Or where commanded he virginity? Right? It's like, where did God command virginity? Tell me. If you know, if you find a biblical quote that that shows me, that proves that God commanded virginity, show it to me. I know as well as you, it is no doubt, the apostle, when he speaks of maidenhood, he said that he had no precept concerning it. Men may advise a woman to be one, but advice is no commandment. Notice how witty she is. Men may advise a woman to be a virgin, but advice is no commandment. That is, there's no divine obligation for virginity, she says. Um, okay. So then, had he damned marriage along with the act of procreation, and certainly if there were no seed sown, then from what should virginity grow? In any case, Paul dared not command, a thing of which his master gave no command. The price is set up for virginity. Catch it whomever can. Let's see who runs best. Um, okay. So then she goes on talking about the same for a little longer. Um, I just want to show you that she's a little bit repetitive. Line 105, virginity is great perfection, and continence, that is restrained, um, celibacy, is also with devotion. But Christ, who is the source of perfection, did not command that everyone should go sell all that he had and give it to the poor, and in such ways follow him in his footsteps. Spoke to those who would live perfectly. And gentlemen, by your leave, I am not that. So again, she's using Christ to show that in the Bible, Christ advises certain kinds of behavior, but he doesn't command. So Jesus did not command, didn't order that everyone should go and sell everything they had and give it to the poor. And I think that's a really interesting, um, that's a very clever strategy of persuasion, because we have to remember that she's talking to a group among which we have several clergymen who were very well off. They had a lot of money, many of whom were actually corrupt. That's how they had their money. So she says, look, Jesus did not order everyone to sell everything. Yes, suggestion, but it's just a suggestion. And thank you, Bernabe. The thing is that she's talking to men who are not going to sell everything and give it to the poor. So again, she's indirectly talking about the hypocrisy of men, even those men who work in the church. Because even when Jesus and the apostles, actually, the apostles left everything, sold everything, and gave it to the poor, the pilgrims who are traveling with her have a lot of money. They are actually corrupt, and they are not giving it to the poor. So she's saying, just as Jesus um, uh, showed certain kinds of behavior, but didn't order that, he didn't order virginity for women, right? So I think looking at her strategies, like her argumentative strategies, I think are extremely interesting. She hasn't received formal education, but remember the first word she begins her prologue with: experience. She's an experienced woman. She has gone through a lot. She has been married since the age of 12, and in those years, and in her lifetime, she has learned a lot. And from her prologue, we can also see that she has also learned about hypocrisy in society and prejudice against women. And as I was saying before, the double standards for women's behavior and men's behavior. And as I said before, what's really interesting for me, and I appreciate of the story, is the fact that it's the man who has created this character. Now, we are going to discuss next class that there are different ways in which you can perceive the character. For many readers, she's just a manipulative woman who will do anything and everything to get what she wants. And that is one valid way of perceiving her. I also believe, and it's not mutually exclusive to this perception I'm mentioning. I also believe that she is a survivor in a very harsh society. So there are different ways in which you can interpret her manipulation. That is, Chaucer creates a very complex character. It's a character that you don't necessarily sympathize with very easily. Um, you will see later on that she does use men. Um, One interesting question to ask, though, is what other options were there for women in this kind of society if they wanted to enjoy a certain degree of freedom or um, to try to create a future for themselves? I think the answer is that there were not many options. And of course, I'm not saying it's not a personal value of mine. Um, I'm not saying that people should be manipulative in any way, but I think it's important to remember that this is the 15th century. Um, these are medieval times, and the options women had at the time were not remotely similar to the circumstances that women have or enjoy nowadays. Okay, so I'm going to try to it tonight. I'm going to upload a reading guide because I know it's even maybe to for you to skip some of the lines as you saw before, or maybe not skip them altogether, but to read them very quickly. As you were able to see, there's a lot of repetition, so maybe I can summarize some of the lines for you so that you read them very quickly and you more or less know what she's talking about, whether she's talking about marriage or virginity. She will later on describe her husbands, and so that you read um, the prologue and, if possible, part of the story for next class. Okay, so I'm going um, to stop the class now so that I can start putting together a reading guide, um, so that you can use that to accompany the reading of the text, which can be rather slow. But even if slow, remember that it's modern English, right? So if there are words you don't understand, you just have to be patient, go to the dictionary, take it easy. But I'm going to try to simplify it so that it's not as complex. Um, but again, I just want to close the class by once again sending my prayers to all of your relatives and friends who have passed away. Um, I think it's such a hard part of living, right, of life, to saying goodbye to people we love very dearly. So I send a huge hug to all of you who might be hurting or brokenhearted because a dear, a beloved person in your life passed away. Today is a special day in which we remember all of the people in our lives who are not physically with us. But I do believe in in spirit, they continue to be with us. And I especially want to send a prayer or a thought to all those women who have lost their lives in the hands mm, of men who have been violent to them. And of course, I want to I'm thinking especially of this young teacher in Tucumán who has recently lost her life so tragically on Friday, Paola Estefania Tacacho. And of course, I want to send a huge hug um, to Gabi Parraga, who had to suffer such a terrible experience. I always think of her sister and her young nephew, and it just breaks my heart to know that she had to go through such a terrible experience. So a huge hug to all of you. Thank you for being here. Be patient with the text of the Wife of Bath. Um, but I think it's worth the patience, the text, because it's such an interesting message from medieval times. So I will see you next Tuesday to talk a little bit more about the wife of Bath and her husband.
Okay, Miss. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye
Okay, Miss.
bye.
Thank you.
Okay, bye
Bye
bye,
bye.
everyone.
Thank you for your words.